On this episode of the Breathe, Love, and Magic podcast, I'm speaking with Eugenia Oganova. She is an international leader in personal transformation with over 20 years of experience, a transcendent teacher of multidimensional wisdom for the purpose of elevating individual consciousness. And she's a catalyst in the shift into sovereign individuality and unity consciousness, where as awakened beings, we are truly free to create the life we desire, filled with joy, abundance, and creative contribution. She's the best-selling author of 3 books, which we're going to talk a little bit about. She's traveled the world teaching her methodology and wisdom and taken people to sacred sites. Ooh, I want to go. And she's also a business coach and not your typical writer. Eugenia is clairvoyant, and she uses her extraordinary abilities to download information and support her clients in addition to solid business strategies. Sounds fabulous. Welcome, Eugenia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here, Ronnie.
There are so many things I want to talk about. So the first one is, tell me about unity consciousness.
Yeah, unity consciousness, it's the next level of evolution of humanity. So we are right now in separation consciousness. This is where we have duality. This is the typical 3D consciousness. This is where, you and I, and we think that we're 2 separate people. In unity consciousness, it's a next step of evolution. That does not mean that it erases individuality, but it links it into oneness. So most people think that awakening means that we connect into this divine oneness and just sort of dissolve in it and become all somehow ascended oneness. But in my understanding of reality, and part of the transcension methodology that I teach, is that we become components that are individualized in our own divinity. And then that is what's connected to oneness. So that's what unity consciousness is. It's essentially unifying humanity with other consciousnesses throughout the universe. So we finally enter the cosmic community, I guess, of conscious entities.
That's pretty interesting. I was doing this meditation to release some bindings that I had and about magic. And one of the end results was I was told to stand on this round metal plate that had 2 hearts interlocking up and down, kind of like a Star of David, but hearts. And so I looked up, is that a real thing? What is that? And whatever. And guess what it stands for? Unity. And so I was told, if you're going to go do any kind of magic, imagine standing on this plate with the unity symbol, and you will be fine to go from there. And so that's fascinating what you're talking about, because I haven't heard about, I haven't heard it spoken that way. I haven't heard about the individuality still being retained, which that sounds good to me,
Well, yeah. And I think the misconception is that individuality is ego, and that the some higher state is just oneness. But that's sort of a kindergarten solution to consciousness. But what I teach is more like a PhD version. That's where you actually look at the details of how it's all made. And that's actually that's in my books too. But we have lower self, we have ego, we have higher self, and we have a soul self. So individuality actually goes through all of them. And we can be imprinted and conditioned by other components of our environment, by our parents, by our karmic patterns and overlays and so on. But when you shed all of that, your ego self actually becomes transparent, so that it naturally follows everything that is your higher self or the soul self desire. That is still individuality, but it's a very different individuality than, let's say, whatever you would normally think of yourself within your parameters of life. This is beyond regular components. So it's not like, oh, I am, this job or, this role in my family or whatever. It goes beyond that into who are you really? What are your natural superpowers? What is your mission on earth? What is your mission as a soul throughout many incarnations? What are you learning? What is the main drive for why you chose to incarnate in the first place, maybe 200 lifetimes ago, and so on? That's all individuality. That does not get erased. But as we complete every lifetime, of course, we complete whatever the story is within a lifetime. So most people mistake a story, as in, I am this person in this lifetime doing this, with their individuality. That's not really, in a spiritual sense, individuality. That's more like a movie you're watching for the duration of your lifetime, and then the movie is over, but you're still you. But what's left on the other side, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm the person who worries about my kids. What's left is something way beyond, right? So that's the higher self and the soul self. The higher self is actually created within each lifetime. The soul self carries over from lifetime to lifetime. Those two components of individuality, at some point when we dimensionally progress, so this is ascension and transcension, going beyond into 5D and 6D and so on, in different incarnations, even the higher self identity also begins to become transparent, just like the ego within a lifetime. And then what is left is the soul self.
The next thing I want to talk about is, before we got started, I mentioned that as a child, I was very interested in Akhenaten. And you have a historical novel, The Secret of Sekhmet, Why Akhenaten Challenged the Gods of Egypt. So I'm just so curious. I have to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, that book, this is the book, The Secret of Sekhmet. It has Sekhmet, the lion goddess, on the cover. And the book is actually about her during the time of Akhenaten. So I had a lifetime during that time in Egypt, and I brought in this book a combination of the mystery school teachings of that time, where there was a secret society, and then there was the outer society in Egyptian culture. So there were two layers, and then the whole shift from multi-god system to one god, Aten, the light, and then shift back to multi-god system. Why it all happened, what it all meant, and the Sekhmet being, she is a person in a sixth dimension that came down here in the third dimension and initiated a lot of the components of that. So I talk about how it all is connected to human evolution, what it meant to the process of human evolution. And the entire book is written very precisely, it's historically correct. So it's a mystery novel, it's adventure. So it's a page turner. You go through it fast because stuff is happening and you want to know what happens in the next chapter. So there is a lot of that. Like I've had people tell me, like, I can't go to sleep, I have to finish this chapter because there's like so much going on. What are you doing to me? So yeah, there's definitely that. But it's all written from the correct standpoint in history. So as you're reading, I write kind of like a movie, like my language is very visual. So when you're walking through the temple, let's say, you can smell the smells, you can see what they are seeing at that time. You can look at the procession of like whatever steps they're taking as they're going along their lives. We go to Amarna, the Akhenaten city, and other things in there. So all these components are in the book. And I've actually had people, like I know a lot of people in Egypt because I've taken groups there for spiritual journeys, and archaeologists who tell me, like, okay, how do you know this stuff? This is what we've been researching. We know, like, this person mummy is returned, like related to this mummy or this or that, but none of that is published information because we don't want to change history, or we don't want to publish this yet, and so on. So it's actually all historically correct. It's just, I know it not from DNA testing, but from remembering who's related to whom and how it happened. Right. So as you read that, you actually experience life back then as if you fully like emerge into it, and it starts to feel like, oh my God, this is what it felt like. And you have a little bit of a current perspective on it. And you can also shift from their perspective, because I write from both angles, which is actually really cool, because a lot of people who are interested in that book, they also had lifetimes in Egypt. So it becomes almost like a returning home, because you start to sense all these energies that I'm describing in your body, because the book is energy coded. Everything that I'm describing has multidimensional components to it. So as you're reading it, you're actually remembering some of your own lifetime components. And I've had many people who wrote me after reading my book that they either felt connected to Sekhmet, or they've been in this temple, or they always thought that this temple was there, or when they were in Egypt in this temple, they just knew there was this thing that I'm describing, which right now it's not, it's a ruin, and so on. So it's very interesting. And a lot of the temples and things in the book, you can also check, like literally find them online. If you're that kind of a person and like to do research, you can see all the components. So now there might be only 2 columns standing. But in my book, there's a full temple, let's say, as they walk through it. So it's really cool to see the juxtaposition of current reality in the past. And as I said, it's an adventure novel, so it's really fun to read. There's only like a couple made up characters to introduce the story in order for you to actually get into it. But once you're in it, the whole thing is historically correct.
That is so cool. I can't wait to read it. And, what stood out for me about that story was how the priest, after he died, Akhenaten, the priest went and chiseled his name out of everything. And that is what just like, like just left such a heavy, dense impression of like all that work, all that opening, all that light. And they just chiseled him out of history. And yet we still know about him.
Exactly. And there are many examples in human history like that, where something was brought in of a higher frequency. Humanity was not necessarily ready for it. Certain number of people were able to accept it and be moved by it. But then majority, the morphogenic field of the group consciousness, swallowed that and tried to take it out of existence. And I mean, we're still finding it in every culture, in French culture and Mayan culture, like any culture you can think of on Earth that is old enough, that had some awakening. There are pieces like that. This is one of the examples from Egyptian culture. And if you read my book, you will see sort of what's the undercurrents as to why it happened, who did what. And it's, I think it's actually very healing to understand cycles of human history. So instead of thinking like, oh, there was a light and now light got killed. Light cannot get killed. Once something is imprinted, it is forever there. But understanding the cycles of how humanity kind of goes for the awakening. Some people make it from that top part of the wave, and then the rest of the wave goes down, and then another wave up. And again, some people from the top of the wave make it into next state of consciousness, and then the rest of humanity goes down. That's actually very healing, because we then let go of attachment to having to protect the light, from having to do something to like get humans to the next level. Everybody will eventually get there, but our job is to maintain specific frequency that is part of our contract in order to hold the range open for humanity to have that next state of consciousness available.
All right, let's move on to talk about, I can't believe this says this, because I've been talking about this, I've been reading about it, and here it is: weaving masculine business strategies to feminine quantum energetics. So that I would love to hear about that. And just briefly, I had an experience with a coach recently, and she's a very nice woman, and I know she means well. But all she wanted to do was talk about what my funnel was and what my nurture sequence was. And I was like, I just don't want to hear it. Not that those things don't work, because of course they work, but I can't go there. It just doesn't resonate with me anymore. I've tried a lot of those things, and I am really much more open to the idea of that feminine idea of business. And I also read a book recently from a woman from Australia called Wild Business. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but she talked about that too. Well, the whole idea of allowing her feminine wisdom and energy direct her marketing and bring her to success. So let's hear how what you say about knitting those two things together.
Well, first of all, both energies are important and both are necessary. You cannot do business purely on intuition and just hoping and wishing that something would show up by being in a high frequency, because you have to be in a third dimension. So obviously the material strategies are important, and I am a business strategist. But I'm one of those odd people that is multidimensional and clairvoyant and open to other possibilities and quantum field, and that's the quantum feminine side. So I bring that into strategies. What I find is that majority of the business place has been dominated by the male consciousness. It has been designed for men. Most of entrepreneurship and, of course, corporate space itself is very patriarchal and masculine. But then entrepreneurship that kind of stepped out of that was also, a lot of it was masculine. It was all based on systems and strategies and things like 20-step funnel and nurture sequence and all this stuff. Now, of course, it works. Of course, it's needed component of business, but that is also very cold, dry, and dead. So the other side of reality, this is where we connect to intuition. This is where we know our soul design. So whatever actions we take are based on our natural energy flow. This is where we expand our wealth container so that we can receive more, so that we can attract more. This is where we utilize quantum field in order to tune in to what's possible, and then use our intuition and other components of ourselves, like inner knowing, to make the steps. So what I teach my clients is the combination of both. I work with spiritual coaches. I work with conscious leaders, with healers, with energy workers, light workers, anybody who is transformational teacher one way or another. Those people usually have a lot of talent and a lot of ability, and they obviously having great results with their clients, but they're not generating that much income because they just don't know the business side. And every time they go into learning the business side, what happens is exactly what you were naming. It's this feeling of, oh my God, this is cold, dry, and dead, and I don't want it. So then we reject the masculine side of business, and then there is no business, there's no money. So the way I teach it is that you have to combine both sides, but it doesn't start with the strategy masculine side. It starts with understanding your soul design. It starts with understanding what are the gifts you have, not whatever skills you've learned, but what are the energetic gifts you have, which frequencies you specifically brought into Earth that are the gifts that you meant to give other people and through which you meant to generate wealth. And which gifts are just for you, and which things are not gifts at all, but imprints from, let's say, something else that you don't need to waste your energy on. So understanding all of that, that's essentially like knowing your soul expertise. From that, you understand who you have a soul contract with, who are the people who are already here on Earth, who are requiring, needing, and wanting the very thing that your gift is. So understanding that energy match, fully becoming that stepping into the premium level of yourself and working with that premium level client creates a very different energetic relationship with your business. From that standpoint, we then understand and create your methodology. Methodology is how you do what you do. A lot of spiritual people don't know how to explain what they do. They're like, well, I don't know. I just do everything, or I just do something, or something happens. And you cannot sell that. And that's part of the reason why a lot of times no money happens. So my expertise and my talent, my gift, my superpower is that I am able to help my clients find those components within them, to understand how they do what they do, to put that process from the multidimensional nonlinear into something that is very linear and step by step, but still retains the multidimensional component. Instead of dumbing it down to like version that you don't even feel like this is something you want to do, it still remains to be multidimensional, but now it has the correct energy imprinted in something linear. So that's your methodology. So far I've named 3 things: soul expertise, who you have contract with, for whom you meant to do it. So that's like niching, but from the higher perspective. And then your methodology, your process. The next step would be to understand what container you want to put that process in. Most people do not have that component figured out. They just kind of do one-off sessions, or maybe they teach a course here and there. So I work with each person to find within their soul design, what is the natural way for them to do it. Is it a higher level program? Is it something that is ongoing? Is it something that you need to go on and off instead of a continuous, and so on? So we look at your energetics so that you do not ever end up in burnout or force yourself or put pressure on yourself, but that your business strategy and a container that you're going to put your methodology actually matching the natural energetics that you came in with. So that's a step 4. And once you have that, then the next step is, again, based on your soul design. How do you meant to promote this? Because if we don't promote this, nothing happens. If you just sit there and meditate and hope that clients come, that doesn't work, or at least it's not a consistent business strategy. Neither is referral. But if you're actually interested in getting to 6 figures and more, and you actually want to create larger impact on this planet through your incredible gift, then you do need to have some sort of a promotional strategy or marketing strategy. For that, I utilize quantum energetics. So now we're not just going to write, let's say, a sales page or a, some sort of a email or something, but we're going to look at, okay, when you make, let's say, a video, what energy are you in? What is the emphasis point energetically that you're making? How is this going to resonate specifically? What do you need to mention? Where do you need to let go? Same thing with writing. Same thing with everything. If there is a strategy, if you know what you're doing, but it's built on that quantum component of who you are, which is really feeling based, intuition based, and knowing as to who you are and where your soul wants you to put emphasis on in order to attract correct people. This solves the problem of chasing after clients, because now you become a vortex and you attract clients to you. And if your wealth container is also worked on and is expanded, that means you now can receive what is coming. And that also connects to wealth itself, as in money piece. So that's the process that I take my clients through so that they understand these pieces, the soul expertise, the who is this for part, the niching on the soul contract way, the methodology, which is how they do their process, and what container they're going to put it in. So what kind of a program or offer they're going to create that is matching who they are. And then from that, the marketing. But notice how all of this, of course, there's some literal masculine business components, like you got to know how to, let's say, write, or how to make a video, or how to download something, or how to connect one thing to another so that somebody can opt in, let's say, for your beautiful free class or something like that. But once you set very basic pieces, a lot of the rest of it is just energetical alignment. So I find that most spiritual entrepreneurs, because they don't know what they're doing, they get those $27 courses or $500 courses, and they think it's going to fix something. So then they end up doing 200 different things, and none of them are connected to each other, and it's just a waste of energy, and most of the time doesn't even fit with one soul design. So what I do instead is I say, okay, it's much better for you to invest in something higher level, but then it's going to be customized to you. So now, instead of by the end of this, learning to do 200 things, you just learn, okay, these are the 3 things that I need to put my efforts in. 3 or 2 or 4. That's it. So then you're not wasting your energy anymore. You now essentially rinse and repeat. You now know what to focus on. You're relaxed in your life, and your business and your life become interwoven correctly. That's the masculine and feminine woven together.
Yeah, beautiful. So, yeah, I didn't mean to say you don't need to have a nurture sequence or do emails or whatever. Of course, you still have, in order to make money, you have to use the masculine aspect of things for sure. But I just can't go about it in that step-by-step way anymore. Like, I feel like I have to align more with, like what you were talking about, but probably I never got that deep with it. So, yeah, pretty amazing. So let's talk about soul design then, because I've heard of human design, and I must admit I balk at that. So I feel like it's like astrology for me. I'm not really big on, for example, I had 2 astrologers in my 30s tell me I would never get married, but they were both wrong because I did. So I don't like being hemmed in. You know what I mean? But I'm curious and that's my experience with human design, So, but what is soul design? I've never heard of that.
Well, soul design is something I have invented. It's my methodology. So it is a combination of many factors. Mostly it is my clairvoyant vision. So I look at someone's soul contract. I look at their karmic patterns. I look at the gifts they brought. I look at how those gifts are woven, which components are profit potential for a person, which components are related to their life cycles, as in how they meant to progress through their life, which components are about their personal evolution, like what are the shadow sides, what is the developmental area to focus on, where the lessons are, what is the next level of component or process as to where you can arrive at, and so on. So like the next personal evolution piece, what is the correct drive to focus on, but mostly what is the correct energetics for the person. So not everybody's designed the same way. We're all designed very differently, but if you kind of bring it down, so the basic, there would be two. You're either more on the electric side, more masculine, or more on the magnetic side, more feminine. Then from that, there are more variations and more variations. And at some point we get to over 1,000 variations. So that's part of what I do, is looking at the person from many different angles. And I utilize other components as well. I utilize, of course, the chakra system and the Hindu understanding of that and my own translation of that. I utilize some astrology, some human design. I utilize gene keys. I utilize Kabbalah. I utilize I Ching. I utilize a lot of pieces, but none of them by themselves going to give you the answer. One thing I want to address in what you said is feeling like, let's say, astrology or human design is going to pigeonhole you into something. That is a very lower level, like the total kindergarten level, kind of like when people pick astrology from a newspaper magazine and say, oh, my horoscope says that. Yeah, it never is right. And a lot of times, unfortunately, many people who say they do those things, they are more like technicians, not the artists. So they just read whatever they see, and then they read some book that says, okay, this means that. That is not how it's intended, and this is not what it's for. So when you are born, there are certain influences that happen to you. And I don't know that much astrology, so I wouldn't go from that standpoint. But from what I do understand is that when I look at every human being, if I know where they were born in the reality, in the place on this earth and the time, I can see timelines and possibilities and what they've been influenced by. Now, from that place, we start decoding the personality. So understanding how your energy flows. Like, for example, somebody might actually naturally be the person that needs to conserve their energy because they don't have endless supply of that they have to recharge a lot. But they've been born into a family where everybody was like an Energizer bunny. So then they got programmed into, well, I have to have energy because that's my pride. Like, I'm strong, I can do it. And because they open, maybe empathic, they perhaps can when they're around those kinds of people. But as soon as they leave the family, like let's say person grows up, goes to college or something, suddenly they feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I have no energy. Am I depressed? When actually that might have been their normal state, but they're trying to live their life as if they are still the Energizer bunny that is matching their family, which they were never in the first place. Or the other way around, let's say somebody who's very much charged person, like they have a lot of energy and it's directional and they need to go and do something and accomplish. And then they maybe been judged for that and said, like, why can't you never sit still? Why do you always have to do many things at once? Just focus on one thing. You know, why can't you just calm down? Or maybe they try to meditate and they can't because that just doesn't work with their energy. So what I do is I actually uncover, how are you built? What is your natural soul design? Not all these layers, but the natural one. So when I do that kind of a, it's called a VIP day. So for 5 hours, we just literally look at how you're built and the download of the entire thing, including for your business, if you're an entrepreneur, how you meant to generate wealth, how you meant to use your energy, and so on. Within all of that, most times the strongest response I get is relief from people. They're like, oh, thank God. Like, I knew all this stuff, kinda, but like you almost like you're giving me permission to just finally claim it and be me. That's what soul design does. It allows you to fully step into who you are, discard what you're not, that you might be confusing with who you are, and instead give yourself permission to fully step into whatever you're meant to do in this incarnation.
So what I hear you saying feels much better to me, because what you're doing is linking all those pieces together so that you are who you really are. Not limiting somebody, but putting all those pieces together so they can be the fullest expression of who they are. And that's a very different approach than somebody telling me, do you really want to get married? Because I don't really see that for you.
Yeah, and that's also, well, I don't know this person who's told you that, but from my perspective, that would be pretty limited perspective, even on knowing astrology. Because most of the time, like when somebody asks me, like, let's say, do you think I should launch my course right now? So we would look at her design, we would look at her energetics, we would look at that. But my job is not to tell somebody what they should or should not do. We have free will. We can do anything. 100% possible, 100% of the time. But what I can say is, would this be easier? or would this be more challenging? If you go this way, if you approach it from this other angle, or if you don't go there at all, let's look at each three possibilities and see what would be the outcome, which I can do. And then from that standpoint, the individual themselves makes a decision. And I also actually teach my clients how to properly make decisions. So questions like this don't even show up as should I launch this course now or not, because they already got trained as to which part of them decision-making process initiates from. And that's very different for people. It's not always like, like we're trained to do it from our heads, right? Like pros and cons and stuff, but that's never the way. So some people, it's intuition. For some people, it's instant in the moment. For other people, there are a lot of emotional waves and they have to know how to read those waves to understand themselves. Some people, it's from the heart. Some people, it's from the throat chakra. Some people, it's actually from the back of the second chakra, like from their hips. There are many different ways how you can be programmed to decide, and your system, if you learn that way, automatically gives you the answer. It's a yes or a no, and there's no question. So a lot of the confusion and worry and what ifs just goes away because you're now living in synchronicity with the quantum field, because you're utilizing your soul design correctly, and you in resonance with quantum field, you just know, yep, this is to do, this is not to do, this is to do now, this is to do later. That's it.
That would certainly be a relief. And I don't mean to diss astrology, because just because I had 2 astrology readings that were wrong doesn't mean there's nothing good in astrology. I don't mean to say that at all. I'm sure there's plenty of good stuff in astrology, and I know people love it. So, that's fine. I just don't like when people put me in a box. So I love how you talk about what you do, because you're adding things up for the greatest good of the person, not to create limitations. So anyway, I love how you have put together all those layers. I mean, that's really amazing. So you could be like on Star Trek playing 3-dimensional chess.
Yeah. Yeah, that the understanding of yourself and understanding of the universe, I think a lot of times the confusion happens where we confuse the meanings of things. Like if somebody thinks, oh, this means that, and then they have an emotional reaction to it that's negative. So they repel whatever it is, even if whatever it is might have been wisdom. And if the original point is explained, so the meaning can be changed, then the response is actually very different. Yeah. So all of this is learning, what meaning do we give reality? If we have strong reactions to things, that's a clue number 1 to look at, okay, why am I so triggered by things? If you're triggered, that means you're not living in alignment. Anytime we have a trigger, that means something is off. It's either bumping into an incorrect meaning that you gave to that reality, or some belief that is somehow in the way and being asked to be clarified, or into some part of you that is not you, that is programmed or imprinted upon you by, how you were living. So triggers are actually wonderful things that life puts in our path in order to help us awaken, because you cannot miss a trigger. Like if you're pissed about something, you know it. And that's actually a very good thing, because, okay, wow, that created a strong reaction. Let's look at what's the cause here. What is in me that is afraid and protecting? Because anytime we have a strong reaction, it's a protective response. So protective response usually goes back right into childhood, when something was either denied or pushed on you as a person. And then you as the person ends up with, okay, I will never let somebody push this on me, or I will never let somebody deny me that. That's a childhood statement that then kind of gets buried within the adult personality. And as a grown-up, you might have a strong response to, let's say somebody says something and suddenly you're like all upset about it. And if instead of projecting the upsetness onto another person, kind of like blame and making them at fault for triggering you, but instead we look inside, we start noticing that, okay, thank you, universe, first of all, gratitude for giving me this trigger, because now I'm aware that something is off. And second, let's look at, what am I protecting? What meaning did I give this event? What does it mean about me? Because no events mean anything about us, but we make it mean something about us. Right. Like, oh, this didn't work out. This means I'm not good enough. Or this I did and it was not quite how I wanted. Oh, that means I'm not worthy, and so on. Those are all meanings we give reality. But reality doesn't want us to do that, because from the universal standpoint, we are forever loved. We are all absolutely cherished and loved. So when we connect to that frequency of divine love within us, we are able to have certain level of kindness so that we can parent ourselves correctly. And that's the part that, bringing it back to what I was saying earlier, finally allows the ego personality to resolve the issues of the lower self and eventually to become transparent so that we just follow the desires of the soul and the navigation from that higher place instead of the ego desires or fearful protection of the lower self issues.
So I hear that you have a free gift you want to share with my listeners.
There's many things on my website that if you go on there, transcensiongate.com, you will see so many things and you can check them all out. But the gift for your audience that I have is the Solar Console and the Language of Light bundle. It is a mini course that allows you to understand more about the Solar Console, which are the multidimensional beings that I work with, understand about the energies on this planet, different species on this planet who are conscious, who are sitting on the console. I do a lot of work with the console, so that gives you sort of the idea as to what is the energy, how to connect to it, what to do with it, how to utilize it for yourself, how to contribute correctly, and so on. And the Language of Light, it's another mini course that's in there. It's a bundle of those two that explains to you a lot of the misconceptions probably that you might have about what Language of Light is, because people think of it from like some symbols to whatever, and they don't really know what it is. So I give very clear ideas to what it is, because being clairvoyant, I'm visual and I literally see a lot of those codes. So over doing this work for 20 years or something, I've seen so many different variations of different ways how the Language of Light can express itself. So by looking through those videos and studying a little bit of what I'm describing, you will start to understand your own interaction with the Language of Light, your own way of receiving it or perceiving it or doing something with it for your own evolution. And there are also pieces there about why starseeds get lonely and how to prevent that, or what is the truth, the personal truth versus the higher truth, and how to open your heart for divine love, and some other pieces that are all part of that bundle. So it would be really great for you.
Fabulous. Well, it sounds very comprehensive. I might have to download that myself. So I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your insights and wisdom and explaining how the masculine and the feminine can work together in business. This was very eye-opening. So I appreciate that you were here today. Thank you so much, Eugenia.
Oh, thank you so much, Ronnie, for having me here. And I hope that this will have some wisdom for your listeners and something that they can apply and understand, perhaps different, maybe some light bulbs went off.
That would be awesome. That's always what we look for, right? The aha moment.
Exactly.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.